So welcome everyone. Please remember to mute yourself whenever you are not speaking. All slides and links referenced in this webinar will be sent out along with the recording and PowerPoint presentation in the monthly edition of the Light Center Professional Development to Go newsletter. They will also be available on Spoke. Welcome to the October How To series webinar, How to Maximize Student Talk Time and Improve Engagement. This lesson will explore classroom ideas to help you reduce your talking time while maximizing learners' speaking time in order to enhance engagement and collaboration. First, let me introduce today's facilitator, Dr. Cynthia Azari. Dr. Azari has over 35 years of professional experience in higher education, educational administration, leadership, and teaching, including supervision of college operations and programs, faculty and staff selection, planning, curriculum development, faculty evaluation, budget preparation, and community involvement. Throughout her career, Dr. Azari has taught various courses in leadership and management and brings experience and practical application of management principles to the classroom. She has taught 9 years at Westcliff University in the MBA and DBA programs. Dr. Azari has been a collaborative proponent of positively maximizing the teaching and learning environment of the classroom for the benefit of student success. So I will hand it over to Dr. Azari now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening or good day or good morning, wherever you are. I'm on the Pacific Coast, so it's evening. So I want to thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking about setting the stage and providing opportunities for student engagement. So students can be active participants in the classroom. So I'll start with, I'm hoping this works. I've had a problem today with Zoom, but let's see. Okay. All right, so student engagement, creating moments for students. Making sure
we can't see your screen. So go. Let me do it.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I was afraid of that.
Hope you were prepared. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Dr. Azari, are we on the correct slide to begin, or do you want me to go?
No, that's fine. Well,
Okay.
if you go to the previous one first. The previous one with students raising their hands. And now I can't see anyone. Let's see. Okay. Oh, there you go. There's the gallery. All right. So creating moments for students. And I apologize, but in reality, we have these problems all of the time with technology. And so just bear with me. And just like our students, sometimes it takes a few minutes for us to get started, but we find things for them to do, right? So we want to encourage students to interact. And to do that, we need to, first of all, create the environment for the students to be involved. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. So I'll go back to one item from research that I read and I presented last time. In student engagement, there is a very strong link between student talk time and achievement. And students in classrooms where students were more talkative were more successful. And what I found interesting was that this applies to all students, regardless of socioeconomic background or gender. Because a lot of previous studies, especially in elementary school, had been done, and they found that boys were more talkative and boys were more involved in the classroom. But this is primarily for higher education. That this applies to all students. Engagement is what makes life more. Engagement is what makes life more memorable, and that is a quote from Kevin De La Tour, who wrote one of the articles that I read about active student engagement in online courses. Next, please.
So just really quickly, Professor Okoth put in the chat, I personally need to be engaged in conversation to be able to internalize information.
You're absolutely right. And all of our students are like that as well. Would you like to add anything else to this, Professor Okoth?
Yeah, even the students who don't always talk as much, because there's always the students who are more prevalent in conversation, there are ways to get them to speak. So like I'm learning to use Nearpod or those small opportunities, or like in class, I allow students to respond to me private because they don't want to share their answers. And even that, so I'm really working harder on not listening to the student who's the loudest. 'Cause you can dominate conversation. So allowing that, and that pause is important. So I'm learning to pause. So at least with Zoom, I have the timer in the corner usually. So
Ah,
I get like any questions. That is the longest 10 to 15 seconds of my life. But it allows for like, yeah, a student needs to connect, or maybe they're typing in the chat. I have to provide that opportunity. And I am a person who doesn't know pause. So this has really been also, it's something that has to be very thoughtful because I
you're,
am that student who loves
you're
talking. Not everyone does it.
you're absolutely right, and I'm learning the same thing because I tend to rephrase a question, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I do appreciate that, and I'm sure that you will continue to contribute. So thank you. Um, Good evening, Dr. Nina. Nice to see you. All right, so we start with the first day of school, and when you look at the back to school, I like this because, of course, the fourth student is a college student. These are the students coming to us. They, most of my students are working full time. A lot of them have families. They're graduate students, but even undergraduate students, they're overloaded, and they come to us. And most of our students are international students. And so not only are they coming to us with a different background and different language, for many of them, English is a second or third or fourth language. So, and yet we expect them to write in English. So they have a pretty heavy burden. So we have to remember that. Next slide, please. And so on the first day and evening, and you can share what you do as well, I set the stage. I do a self-introduction and talk a little bit about the course, but have students introduce themselves. And if it's a small group, sometimes I have, 12 or 15 or fewer, and I'll ask them one thing they want to learn from the course, which my favorite is if it's a management course, well, I want to learn how to be a good manager, which tells me they really haven't read the syllabus. They really haven't read much about it, but at least those who have will say a little something that's more related to the course. I'll talk about participation expectations and participation grade, because a lot of students don't know there's the participation grade. So it's our responsibility to let them know that. And I'll talk about cameras on. I do have that expectation of cameras on. And I tell students, if your cameras are off, maybe you have to take a break, or some students are leaving work late and they're in their car. I don't want your camera on when you're in the car. But as soon as you arrive home, turn your camera on, because I have had students, and I'm sure you have too, who turn the camera off, and then you ask them a question and they don't respond, and you ask another question because they're not there. So I do have a requirement: bandwidth issues. Are you having issues with bandwidth with a lot of students?
Yeah, well, that's my point. A lot of times they'd like to, I guess, reconcile the need for having their camera off by saying I've got bandwidth issues. And Professor DeVito, if I keep my camera off, I can continue staying plugged into the class.
Well, and what do you respond? What do you say?
Well, when they say that, I say, turn your camera on.
Right, exactly. Turn your camera on. I've even had a couple where I'll say, okay, why don't you get on your phone? You can join us by phone. Okay, that way we can see you. But I do ask students to do that because unfortunately there are some who will just watch television or do something else. So can you go to the next slide, please? Camera on and we get to see their beautiful ceiling. Yeah, that's true. So in that case, I would say cameras on and on your face. So we want to be able to see you. All right, so you have to create that learning environment. You have to change that learning environment and create one that promotes attention and engagement. First, set the stage, as I said, provide your expectations and encourage critical thinking and keep students engaged. Any comments about encouraging critical thinking?
Knowing how to ask open questions. So
Okay.
And my biggest thing with all my classes, I don't want to hear what you don't know. Tell me what you know. You know what we don't know, that's stressful. And then like tell me your thought process. And a lot of them we're hard on ourselves, right? We're our own worst critic. So just letting like, hey, I care about your process, making it clear that right or wrong answers, that's information for me. If I teach you something and you guys all have the same misconception, I did something wrong. And I need to address, and reassuring that the evaluation is not like criticizing them, it's for me to get more feedback. And once they realize, and then they're more willing to think a little more critically, but even giving them enough time, not asking questions back to back.
Giving some time, exactly. And allowing their colleagues to address the questions as well, or to respond to their responses. Anthony, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm like Simon Sinek. I like the ask the why question. What's the why? Why do you believe that? Why do you feel that way? Why is that important? Why should we know that?
I think that's very important.
It's that open-ended question that Professor Okoth started.
Okay.
And you have to be careful, because some students, when I ask them, why did you get that? They're thinking they're wrong.
Okay.
It's like, no, it's just like, especially in math, it's like, what? How did you get that answer? Now they're like, oh, it's wrong. No, I just wanted to know how you got the answer. Sometimes we get the right answer the incorrect way. Or I'm trying to challenge you to use the math terminology, trying to grow the vocab, because I told them you guys can do the math until I tell you the actual proper terms, and you're like, I don't know how to do this. You do, you just don't have the language associated to it. But
Okay.
yeah.
All right, good. Any other comments? All right, so next slide, please. All right, so I generally start every class with, and I'll tell them from the very beginning, and again, I teach graduate students, let's talk about current events. What's going on in the world? We'll talk about, 1, 2, maybe three events. And I do this for several reasons. First of all, they're college students, they're graduate students. They need to know what's going on in the world. I have found that unfortunately students get their news from Facebook or TikTok or Twitter, and they need to look at other sources. And so then, all right, so they'll bring up an issue. Russia bombed the electrical stations in Ukraine. All right, so what is the economy? What is the impact on business? What is the impact on economy? And if there are other, Elon Musk just spent $44 billion on what is it, Twitter? Oh, thank you. What is the impact on that? What is the impact on, because I teach business, and on the economy? And what I've started asking, as we have so many international students, what is the impact on the economy in your country? And I have found that the students from India will say, in India, they know, and they'll share that, and they're happy to share that. So we'll try to talk about the global economy as well. But I ask that. So what are some of your starters?
Food brings everyone together. Talking about food.
Food, okay.
Like today we did intros. Just one fun fact. I asked a little bit. I try to comment a little bit on something they're saying to like show and kind of understand them more. But food seems to be something everyone understands. We all like to eat. We can have that debate and then go from there. And then it creates that discussion, because some people are not comfortable talking about certain topics. But food, I don't believe it's a gray area.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay. Anyone else?
I like to say, tell me something good. And I kind of started that in the pandemic, because there was so much going on in the world. And it's a nice way just to check in and kind of moves us a step back from, the task and the responsibilities of class, but just, hey, so tell me something good. What's good in your life? What's good in the world with you? And to check in with them. That's what I like to do.
That's good. I like that. That's a good icebreaker. Anyone else?
I am so sorry I joined a little bit late, but I want to ask you are talking about the relationship between the economy and education?
No, I'm on business. When I talk about current events, what is the impact on business? Whether it's corporate business, small businesses, nonprofit organizations, what is the impact on business?
You mean current event about the COVID-19?
No, current, whatever's going on in the world. You know,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, current event.
Okay.
Okay, so Bed Bath and Beyond is going bankrupt, and the CFO jumped out of an apartment in Manhattan about 3 or 4 weeks ago and killed himself. So that someone brought that up, all right, what is the impact? Well, you know, not only on that particular business and that particular corporation, but nationally or internationally, what is the impact? What does it look like? You know, those things. Again, why? And we will never know why someone commits suicide, but what is the impact on business? I try to keep it at that level. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have any examples you want to share?
Yes, I can share with you about the war between Russia and Ukraine, about the oil prices and the OPEC countries that they raises their also their production of the oil daily value of the quota on the international market. It has a very direct impact on economy on all the countries.
Exactly.
And the prices and the inflation goes up. The real income, the people nowadays, they couldn't buy things that they buy before in their for $1. Before they can buy one pound of sugar. Nowadays they can buy only half pound.
Right.
If you allocated part of your income for the fuel of your car, and you allocated $100, for example, every week, nowadays you couldn't have, for example, 5 gallons or 10 gallons for your $100. Now you have 5 gallons instead 10 gallons, you know, so less value. So nowadays our mentality changed according to our real income. We have to
exactly
restructure our spending.
So that you talk about not only the impact on business, but the impact on individuals and on families as well.
It is directly goes to us as a people, as a society. The social economic environment, changing because of these current events.
Exactly. All right. So next slide, please. All right. So then we go on to the topic of the class, the topic of that particular evening, and I'll ask questions about the knowledge of the topic. You know, if we're talking about, for example, I teach management, talking about employee motivation, I'll ask, have you experienced that where a manager has motivated employees to do something, maybe willing to work overtime or increase production? Have you observed that? Have you observed management behavior that motivates people in a different way? And so I begin to ask questions about that particular topic, and then lead into that. I normally show 3 to 4 slides, and then I stop sharing. I'm having such a problem with Zoom today. I'm not sure I can do that, but I'll stop sharing because, again, I want to see whose camera is on, who is participating. And, you know, you always get the top 4 or 5 in that on the side, the ones who answer all the questions and the ones who continue to be involved. But I want everyone to know that they are part of the class. And so I'll generally show 3 or 4 slides, stop, and then we'll talk about. I'll also ask for examples. If we're talking about employee motivation, I'll ask for examples and talk about the principles, the management principles, and then talk about application and get them involved in application. So when you think about your topic, how are you introducing that, and how are you keeping the students engaged? Anyone want to share any ideas?
I can share with.
Sure, go ahead.
I can share with them a slides, like picture, I mean. So, and I ask them, what do they learn or what do they know, how they can understand the picture. And from there, I can go to my topic. So this is one approach that I don't share right away the topic, but I can share like picture and they grasp what do they think about what I share with them. So, and then I go forward with my topic or the course.
Oh, that's a good idea. I like that. I'm going to try to use pictures to introduce the topic. Yeah. And that way it does promote critical thinking and introduces them to the topic. Any other ideas you want to share?
I'm that person. I've been keeping my students guessing. They never know what I'm collecting. They never know when we're in breakout rooms. They never know when I'm going to call on them. So like, it's a very, like, you have to be on your toes. I did find the most effective for virtual was Nearpod. And I did state to the students that the questions were timed. So there was a time we had to watch 3 videos. The first video was like 5 minutes. Then I said, all right, you have a question. And then if you'd walked away, you didn't realize your time. So by the time you came back, you ran out of time for the question. So I think when they realized after that, people were more attentive. However, if I'm not using Nearpod, breakout rooms at any question I feel is appropriate, and then I'm iterating through it. So if you don't switch the breakout room when I tell you, I know you're not on the screen, but I try not to talk for more than 10 to 15 minutes straight. So like, I'll try to have as many check for understanding questions as possible, and that makes sense. So if we do a few topics, all right, I'm gonna pause for 1 minute. You guys work on this. That's my chance to check who's there. And then I let them know I'm gonna call in any of you, or we're gonna do a waterfall chat or something of that nature, just to
Okay.
make sure they're constantly.
Yes, you let students know that I may call on you. Yes, good. Professor DeVito, you had an excellent example. Would you share it?
Yeah, I'm teaching a strategic management class, again, one of my favorites. And yeah, Kroger's and Albertsons just announced that they were going to merge. How's that going to affect food prices? That's a hot commodity right now. Food and its costliness. And how will that ease prices, at the grocery store, or will that continue to exacerbate them?
Yes, good question. I asked recently because Kroger did merge with Ralph's a few years ago, but Ralph's maintained its identity. My question was, will Albertsons, first of all, does Albertsons have a real identity, and will it maintain its identity? So yeah, that's pretty good. And you're right, we're all concerned about the prices of groceries. So that's a really good impact question. Okay, asking breakout rooms. I'm sorry, Professor Brody, I missed that. Did you ask? There was someone in the chat box, and I'm sorry, I missed that, about breakout rooms.
It's Professor Okoth asking about breakout rooms to present solutions, or asking students in breakout rooms to present solutions to problems.
Okay. One thing that I learned about breakout rooms is that for students in watching the VCS, you need to leave some students in the main room because they don't see what goes on in the breakout rooms. And I learned that this morning from Professor Lippo. So if you do use breakout rooms, you should always leave one group in the main room. That way the students watching the VCS will be able to see that.
Actually, I like for them to do the question on their own. So when they're doing their VCS summary, they can give their own output and not wait for other people's solutions.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Because anyone can listen. I mean, they're going to have the opportunity to, I want them the opportunity to speak and like have their own thoughts. But if I do decide to have them present, then they'll get other feedback. But ultimately, I want them to be able to provide substance to like, oh, they went to breakout rooms. Okay, but what did you think about the topic? You answer the question.
Okay. Professor DeVito, did you have something?
Yeah, to Professor Okoth's point, well, I have a special question just for absentees. So I make sure that, yeah, they don't have access to the breakout rooms, but they're not off the hook.
Okay, good.
And that's why, like with Nearpod, I really want to get fluent with it, because you can provide them that lesson asynchronously, so they have to go through that full 2 hours on their own. So because I mean, anyone can watch a video. I can decide I don't want to do much and I'm really good at writing, but I want them to really contribute. So I did try that, and the students, some of them actually prefer that than writing the paper, actually participating, and then I get the results and I understand exactly what they understand.
Oh, maybe you can teach a session on that so we can all learn. Okay, next slide, please. Professor Brody, could you move to the next slide? Oh, thank you. All right, so I teach primarily online. And during the pandemic, we were all teaching online. And actually, we were known as some of the experts in online instruction because we've been doing that for a while. So I just continued to stay online. Plus, Irvine's 45 miles away. And I just figured, nah, with the gas prices, it was too expensive. So how do you keep students online? involved and engaged. Well, cooperative team assignments, and some of our courses do have team projects. So I will start talking about the team projects from the first night and talk about that. And that's another reason that it's good to have students introduce themselves. And I'll tell the students, you're going to have team members. So listen to your colleagues and see who you want to share, to invite to serve on your team. And so the team assignments really have worked out well in terms of engaging students, having them working with colleagues, and of course, then presenting. Professor Okoth has mentioned the breakout rooms. One thing I learned from the Engage Week was the group discussions. In the group discussions, the groups were asked to prepare one slide and in order to report on their group discussion. And so I thought that was good because lots of times, one or two people will dominate the conversation and they then will share. But if everyone contributes to the slide, that helps. Professor, Okoth, you had something in the chat box as well.
Yeah, I found the students actually like the pair presentation.
Oh,
It
interesting.
gives them a
Okay.
chance to, because some students want to speak, but they're afraid to be by themselves in speaking. So that also helps. And then I do require they submit individual notes from that group work in the breakout rooms to make sure everyone's working. So we don't we're not like, oh, Joyce is going to do all the work, so we'll just sit back and relax.
Okay, right, exactly. Okay,
Yeah, and when they're doing presentations, write down 1 or 2 takeaways.
okay. Professor Amari?
Thank you. I think we have to know our audience. We are teaching, and we have different students. I am teaching now in West Cliff University. We have students from developing countries, poor countries, and countries that they need a lot of things. If I am asking them questions about something from their environment, it will be very for them. It will be very or it can be touch their pain. They touch their own problems. So if you are talking about the income or about the corruption, about the low income, about the education, if you ask them something, all of them, they want to participate and to give you their idea about that. They want to critique their system, or they want to improve something, or they want to compare with. So it makes sense that when you are knowing, or your audience, you know what question you want to give them.
Exactly. You need to know your audience. That's why student introductions are so important. And reading their discussion questions and papers and learning more about them.
To Dr. Marine's point,
Yes.
Marine's point, I just learned recently that international students in certain countries aren't really taught or told or allowed to challenge the professor in the classroom. So I dispel that right away in week 1. I'm like, come get it. Don't feel shy about, I'm not that guy. So yeah, feel free to express your opinions and challenge even what I say.
Exactly. That's very, very important. As Professor Okoth says, that's good to open the door. And you're right, you have to let them know, because I have found that students who are from those cultures, when I ask them questions, they have perfect answers. They're just reluctant to speak out. So that's why you have to continue to encourage them to do that, to ask them questions, give them opportunities to respond. There's sometimes when I'll say, okay, everyone's going to respond to this question, or I might call on you, so be ready, and then call on 3 or 4 people. But normally if I have about 10 or 15 minutes towards the end of class, I'll ask everyone to respond to something.
By the way, sorry, I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead.
A lot of them, they're very, very excited to express their feelings, how they are living. So they want to say something. So that's why they are very excited to participate.
You're right. They do. And then they start feeling more comfortable. I've had, especially students from China, who were very reluctant, but very bright. And then when they started speaking up, they became comfortable within that environment. And that's the environment that you want to create. Has anyone used Polls Everywhere or Zoom polls? Yes, do you? How do you use it? You want to share? Professor DeVito?
Yeah, icebreaker at the beginning of class, top of class. While they're entering the class, they're getting a Zoom poll right in their face. And they get a chance to respond to that. I'll repeat it occasionally throughout the first 5 minutes of class, and then I'll share the results of the poll with everyone.
And what type of question do you ask?
Oh, it could be, like housekeeping, great. I take a play on words with Charles Dickens' Great Expectations, and I'll say grade expectations, and what my, then I'll have a multiple choice. What all grades will be earned by me or given to by the professor, so on and so forth, or just about the topic of the day, what we're going to be getting into, or a current event, or whatever it might be.
Okay, good. That's certainly a good icebreaker. Anyone else? I have used Poll Everywhere with employees as we were going through a process, and I've used it with students as well. I've not tried Zoom, so I'm getting ready to learn that. I use case studies. With case studies, if they're part of the curriculum, it's pretty easy. But if they're not, I was a guest speaker last Saturday in a course and sent the case study out early. But it's a Saturday class, and how many students are going to read the case study on Friday night? So I gave them a few minutes to look over it, and I did highlight the main points from the case study as we talked about it. But I found that with graduate students, case studies really helped bring out their own opinions and thoughts about the particular case study and what transpired and what they might have done differently. Anyone else use case studies online? Okay, see, I'm supposed to wait, what, 15 seconds?
Yes.
That's where I'm really bad.
Yes.
Okay.
One of my favorite case studies is the Challenger and Columbia disasters, and just let that play. I mean, that you could spin off into leadership issues, strategic management, HR, all kinds of things arise from doing a case study on those two disasters.
Planning, not listening to your
Oh,
experts, all of those. Yes.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. All right. Zoom feedback options. There are, of course, the hand and then the thumbs up. There's also an option for you're going too fast, you're going too slow. So I've only used a few of them, but I'm going to learn more so that I can get students then to tell me I have a tendency to talk too fast. And for people whose original language is not English, it's sometimes, my husband is Iranian and English is his third language. So even after 48 years, he still tells me to slow down. So I have to remember to slow down for students. Okay. Any other involvement? Okay. Announce the beginning. They can ask me to slow down. Oh, good. Yeah, I do ask students to let me know when I'm talking too fast. Okay. And sometimes if there is vocabulary I'm not sure, I'll stop and ask, anyone know what this means? And I'll say, why don't you look it up on your phone? So I will give students an opportunity to share the definition. And sometimes there's 2 or 3 definitions, and we'll talk about that. Because the vocabulary is very important. It depends, it doesn't matter what topic you're teaching, the vocabulary is important for them to know, but especially in business. Teach for engagement. Retention will follow, because if you've been actively involved in that, what's your retention rate? What's most memorable? Things that you sat on the side and watched, or things that you were involved in? It's the same thing for students. So avoid the long lectures, give short pieces, and then stop and then talk with the students, stop sharing your screen, talk with the students. I'm guilty of this sometimes. Do not read the slides, especially those slides we get from those publishers who want to send us 30 slides and each one has, 500 words, and it's awful. So I'll try to just, if I have the time, I'll redo the slides, but that takes a lot of time. So I don't often have that time. It's interesting. The American publishers put a lot of words there. The British publishers put very few, and I end up adding photos or something to that. Say no to publisher slides. Okay, how do you do that?
I prep my class with my own slides, and every now and again I might grab something. I'll beg and borrow and steal from a publisher's slide, but they're too wordy. They're too busy. They're not designed to teach with. They're designed to lecture. Yeah. And if you want to use a flipped classroom model, you can't use a publisher's slide. It just won't work.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Go ahead.
Yeah,
That's-
I agree with Dr. DeVito. So I guess the publisher slide, it's more for the student. If we need to go over the same slide, why do we need to meet?
Yeah.
So the student can read it on their own. They can come, they should come prepared to the class. This is the minimum that they can do. Let them read the slides. But for me, yes, I do my own PowerPoints. It's more engaging. That's why I said I have pictures, videos, questions, few information there comparing with the publisher slide. However, when the class end, I upload this my PowerPoint for the student on the gap under each week, so they can see the real examples that we discussed in the class as well.
Yes, I do the same. I upload my slides. That's very, very important. But occasionally when I don't have time to do that, I'll use, but I will not read. I will just pull highlights from it. Professor Amarin.
Thank you. No, I just agree with Dr. Nino and Dr. DeVito about their own. So we have to create our own slides. I'm creating my own slides, and there is not a lot in the slide. There's some pictures, some highlighted concepts or something like that. And then I am talking about this. So I think all of us, we have these skills. We can talk. We can explain everything by our word on our words, so we don't have to read that. That's all.
Yes, teachers do like to talk. I've noticed that. Yes, we do. Okay, so that's why we do this, because we like to talk. I was going to, tolerate silence. Earlier, Professor Okath brought up tolerating silence. I am learning how to do that. And you count to 15?
Yeah, count to 15. And also it gives me a chance to take a sip of water,
Okay.
catch my breath, because I get so excited. I keep going faster and faster. So, and it's long.
It's long. So what happens if students don't respond after a minute?
It's usually if I'm checking, like, can I move on, take a moment? And then I said, if your question comes at a later moment, to please just drop it in the chat, I will check.
Okay.
But
All right.
I, for the most part, they do respond if I allow them. The waterfall chats have been working.
Now talk about, can you share the waterfall?
So waterfall chat is literally like, I'll tell the students you're going to work on this question for about a minute. Please do not put your answers in the chat yet. I'll let you know when to do it, and we'll do it at the same time, because students will tend to like, oh, let's wait for Omar to post, and then now I'll agree with his answer.
Yeah.
And that's where I have a few students who consistently only do it private, which is fine, but I'm still getting an answer from everybody. And then it gives those students who need a little more time, they're not feeling like they're pressured to just put anything. So if the question ends up being maybe a 5-minute question, I'm like, okay, if you, before I have the waterfall, if you need more time, type 22. If you're done, type 00. And then I'll say, okay, now we can drop our answers at the same time.
Okay. All right, good. Anyone else want to share? About silence and about waiting for responses? Okay. I'm counting to 15.
I usually IG chat with them as well. So if he's silent, didn't respond, just IG chat separately, not for all. Like maybe he's just to be aware that I know I watching him. I ask you, you didn't respond. What's going on? Maybe he want to share me something. So that's why I keep having the individual communication, even during the class, we're using like GChat, not GChat and the Zoom, I mean.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, privately and for
Yes.
everyone. Good. Thank you. All right. So what questions do you have? Or any comments that you want to share? All right. The 15
I don't have a
seconds.
question, but I just wanted to say thank you for sharing the international perspective. I teach courses well, I'm not teaching at the moment, but I design courses for the REAL program. And it's the English program, the ESL program to prepare students for study at Westcliff. And so this is a very important to see what are the perspectives as far as, or what are the things that students are doing in the classroom so that we're able to kind of simulate that in our classroom to help them be prepared. And the wait time is extremely important, and also some of the polling activities. So thank you.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And do you observe classes periodically?
Once in a while. I don't really have much opportunity to do that, but I would really like to be able to see what's happening in different colleges as well.
Well, if you're interested in business, please let me know.
Okay, thank you.
I'd love to have you. All right. So I use this quote: a great question doesn't simply inform, it enlightens. Because again, we're looking at questions that students have from their perspective and questions that the professor has from their perspective. And how do we then interact to enlighten everyone? You can go to the next slide, and then we'll stop sharing. Basically, it leads to student learning. The choices that you make in the classroom lead to student motivation, and the opportunities that you provide and the environment that you create leads to student motivation. They're motivated and they're engaged, and then that leads to student learning. And I really liked this model because it shows that we're all a part of that, and that leads to student learning. So if we could, multiple ways of allowing students to express themselves is important. I noticed trends, and Professor Okoth, you want to complete that? And we can stop sharing too.
I mean, I have classes where calling them is not going to help, but that's also my experience as a special ed teacher. So allowing different ways to express themselves, and sometimes just asking the students. So I'll do a lesson like, hey, at the end, please, in your exit ticket, mention, did you like it? What do you want to see more of? And the students are very open. So some students tell me more videos. So I did a little more videos. Some say they prefer more breakout rooms. So there's one class, we're in the main room for maybe 30 minutes, and most of the time we're in breakout rooms. We go for 20 minutes, come back. And when I go through them, they're talking more, but when they're in the full class, silence.
Right.
So I'm not pulling teeth as much.
Okay, interesting. And then do you go around to the breakout rooms?
Yes. And what I like is I first give them the first 5 minutes, because I don't think it helps to just jump in, let them have time to focus. And what's nice is when you're looking at the breakout rooms, you can see who's speaking and who's mute. So you know if they're actually even talking, or at least somebody is talking in the breakout rooms.
Okay, exactly. Anyone else want to share? Any ideas you use to promote student engagement or to keep them engaged?
I think it's really important to tie them into the concepts that they connect with. So I teach a psychology-based course. So a lot of things are going to tie back to real life situations, or like, for example, I'm teaching a motivation course. So how are you staying motivated to get through school? What are the things you're doing to motivate yourself? And, sometimes I step back and say, let me relate to you through my experience, what I went through. I've been where you're at, and saying, you may not think of this theory in this moment, but you know what? It will come a point, something will trigger your mind, and you will say, hey, I think I remember this. And so I think when we tie things back to how they can relate to it in their real lives, they remember it, and they can tell some anecdotal experiences of their own from my way of sharing, and them sharing back to me, so that we're connecting the ideas and the things that we're talking about.
Exactly. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Broding, did you want to talk about the next session?
Yes, so I put the link in the chat to the survey, so please fill that out. And I just want to highlight our next Y series webinar, which is exploring rubrics as a teaching tool. This is going to be Monday, November 7th. We have an 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time runnings of these, for lack of a better word. And these are going to be facilitated by Dr. Jeanette Flores, Dean of the Light Center. So please join us. And are there any last comments or questions before we close out our session for the evening?
I just have a quick question. Yeah, so I'm very fortunate to be able to conduct Light Center classroom observations of faculty. And last session, I had some doctoral professors that were onboarding for the first time with Westcliff. And invariably, they suffer from that lecture mode that they're so used to, right, at the doctoral level. And so the flipped classroom model is completely foreign to them. What suggestions do you have outside of what we just talked about? What suggestions might you have for the doctoral level engagement process with the students?
I teach doctoral level business classes, and those are the things that I use. I just finished a couple of 700 courses, and one was a class in Jordan. And these students, they were outstanding. They were definitely doctoral students, but we really got engaged. And what surprised me that when I would log on, they were talking about current events. And even though they were speaking Arabic, they said, we're talking about current events because they wanted to be prepared for class. You have to set that stage, even for the doctoral students. Now, for the faculty, you kind of have to have them, unlearn that lecture mode, and then begin to show them how to involve students. And once they see the importance, and once they see students engaged, it becomes fun and it becomes energizing. Does that help?
Absolutely. And I try to emphasize that it happens on purpose. It doesn't happen by accident. So you have to purpose to turn that lecture mode of yours into a more engaging andragogy. And I think it's foreign at first, but then with practice, it's just like anything else. You strengthen a muscle by using it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I had one excellent kind of like a praise report from a doctoral professor that just onboarded, said, I took your idea of using Zoom breakout rooms, and it kind of revolutionized the class and that engagement process. So I think a lot of times they just don't know what tools are available,
Mm-hmm.
and they just have to use them on purpose. So.
First of all, thank you for using andragogy. Does everyone know what andragogy means?
The opposite of pedagogy.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. It's teaching adults, whereas pedagogy is teaching children. It's andragogy, teaching adults, and we're teaching adults. And so adults also like to talk, just like we do. Adults like to share their experiences. And so you give them an opportunity to do that and relate it to the principles and the topic that you're teaching. And it really does become more engaging for the faculty as well. So anytime you teach doctoral faculty, let me know, and I'll spend 5 minutes with them. Any other comments or questions? Well, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us. It's been my pleasure, and thank you.